This is Talk the Devils, the athletic show dedicated to Manchester United. Coming up, you'll hear from Ruben Amorim in conversation with our very own Laurie and Andy amongst the press pack over in America, talking about optimism, setting new standards and his relationship with Sir Jim Ratcliffe. The draw against Everton overnight was enough to crown Manchester United champions of the Premier League Summer Series. We'll get into the details of that, including a debut for Bryan Mbeumo, and we'll also have the very latest on the chase for Benjamin Sesko. But of course, where else do we start than introducing everyone's favourite couple? It's Laurie and Andy. How are you, lads?
We're good, thanks.
Yeah. Greetings from Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah. As you can see, we're a suitable distance apart this time.
Yeah, still fairly close. We had quite a lot of messages about that in the comments on YouTube in particular, so I've enjoyed reading all of those. Thank you very much. It's gone from a work trip, Laurie, to a holiday, to now a honeymoon, apparently.
All I'll say is that I thought, for visual purposes, we had to get that close, but I do appreciate, on reflection, some of the viewers, I know podcast listeners might not have any idea what we're talking about, but the people that were watching on YouTube were a little bit perturbed by how close I was to Andy, and then when I looked at him whilst he was talking, even more so.
Sure.
So hopefully this one is more comfortable viewing for people.
Get out of my face. Someone's just come up to me in Atlanta and get out of my fucking face. I'm like, I'm just going up the world's longest escalator to Laurie's hotel. But riding the Atlanta subway, the Martyr is pretty interesting. Like last night, there was a guy just singing a beautiful Doobie Brothers Michael McDonald song. Sounded fantastic. So I've met some characters here.
Was that supposed to be an American accent, by the way?
Well, yeah, it was an American.
It was very Cockney, wasn't it?
He went from Stoke,
Australian.
wasn't it? Get out of my face.
Yeah, there was a bit of Australian in there. No Portuguese in there, but there's a bit of Portuguese coming up in our podcast because you two have been in conversation with Ruben Amorim, teeing up the new season, really, with the press back over in America. I mean, Andy, could you set the scene for us first before we get into what he's had to say? What was this conversation? How did it come about and where did it take place?
So traditionally at the end of the pre-season tour, the travelling journalist would sit down with the manager. That's pretty normal. And I think 7 or 8 of us did that at the Chicago Fire's training facility. She had a backdrop of downtown Chicago. And Ruben Amorim, he came in and sat within the group, and then we spoke to him for 20 minutes. Every journalist asked at least one question. And I think the feeling afterwards, and it was certainly my initial feeling, and I tweeted this, was he comes across exceptionally well. He's a very good communicator. He looked healthy, he looked really motivated, and he said all of the right things. So that couldn't have gone any better. Clearly, results will be how he will be judged, not how he talks. But I felt that he had a real handle on things. And I don't know what you felt, Laurie, but I came out of it feeling if I was one of his players, I'd really want to succeed for him.
Totally agree with you. I mean, it's obviously one thing, I suppose, for a manager to say compelling things in a press conference and then to journalists, and then another to kind of get players on side with you and kind of make sure that they're, you know, doing what you want them to do in training and then in games. But I certainly came away from it thinking, yeah, I can see why United stuck by him at the end of last season and even appointed him in the first place, because he's certainly got very strong rhetoric and not even just sort of saying the right things, but, you know, he's pretty open. You know, he sort of says more than the right things in a way, and it kind of really, I guess, breaks any kind of barrier between you and him, and the fact that, you know, he's kind of able to give real detail on relationships that we'll get into, or kind of aspects of the club that kind of just humanise him and make you feel, okay, this guy has a real sort of emotion and touch to him. So yeah, I was kind of came away from it thinking, okay, I can see why United stuck by him, and hopefully if anything like the way he talks, then United will be okay this season.
This is like an awkward second date with you two. You can't possibly look at one another, can you?
Even my wife's been getting on my case about it. She's saying, like, you look like dad and son. Okay. You know what I mean? Get home now.
Yeah, that's probably better than some of the other suggestions. But anyway, let's hear from Ruben Amorim. He spoke to you two and others about last season, the disappointment of the way it all went, the fact that he had to prioritise the Europa League final in the final months of the season and basically just wait it out, which it felt like exactly what he was doing. But there is a little bit more optimism, it sounds like, heading into this new campaign.
How are you feeling about This season, Ruben, going into it.
Confidence. When I see team training and team playing, my humor, you call it humor, it goes with the team. If I feel that everything is aligned, I feel more excited. If I feel more excited, I see more video, I see more football, I have more ideas. So I'm really confident in this moment. It's not the case of not knowing what to do to change the club. I felt last season in some moments I just need to survive to the end, because everything I need to do, I will need to do with a new start, with more time, with some changes that I cannot do now. And that is even people around the staff and players. So my goal in that moment, 3 months to the end, was trying to win the Europa League. And we struggled a lot, trying to save players to play 60 minutes. And you cannot do it in Manchester United. You cannot think like that. I had that feeling during the season that I'm so frustrated, I cannot do nothing. And I acknowledge that, so I have to wait. And to wait and being manager of Manchester United is like just like going to a fight with my hands like this, you know? So that was the frustration.
Did you have conversations with the club at that period? You know, reassurances from them, because you talk about surviving. It felt maybe fragile at that point. You might even think you had to walk away at that point.
No, walk away is more an ego thing. I'm like that. If you saw Sporting, I won the league, and we had the second place in the next year. In the third year, we were fourth in the league. When things go bad, I put my place, because it's I don't know, maybe an ego thing. Maybe really romantic about things. If you try to remember one team, one big team, massive team that lost so many games and the manager kept their job, you will not find it. So that show more than words that they support me.
It's funny because he touched there, Laurie, on a key point that someone got in touch about on email. It was Paul. He said if he had the opportunity, he would have asked Ruben Amorim, do you think you're fortunate to still be at the club considering the results under you last season? And basically, it sounds like he thinks he probably is.
I think he probably would have answered that in the affirmative. I mean, in that answer, we did question him about the, speculation or the kind of reports. It was more solid than that. He obviously offered to walk away or put his position, as he puts it, to the club, is something that he did when he was in charge of Sporting, and they'd sold a few players and they were in fourth position in the league. And I think he called it an ego thing. So, the idea being that, perhaps you should actually look beyond your ego and think what's the best thing for the club and can we get through this period. So he, I think, felt he wanted to sort of put that to United. If you don't think I'm the right guy, I will walk away. And so I think, to the listener's question, I think he would have answered that quite openly and basically agreeing with you, because there was no question that was off the agenda. He answered everything and more so, and I think on his own position certainly he went into detail that was kind of greater than perhaps you would have expected. And even to the point of us saying to him, were you doubtful about the backing that you'd receive? And he said, listen, look at what they backed me through. That gives me more confidence than anything they could say to me privately. It was more on me than them, in terms of the potential for this to end. And so I think that, to the listener's question and to the kind of wider sort of conversation around his future, I think that certainly was something that he has addressed and accepted, that he was at jeopardy at different points, but basically because of his own mindset. And now he did also come to the positive conclusion and say, I want to be here for 20 years. This is something that I am absolutely bought into. And so the right noises were then struck. I don't think you could have a full conversation with him where he's just purely talking about potentially walking away without that then positive slant of, okay, I actually do want to be here for a long time.
And I think he's right. I think if it would have been at another huge club, he would have lost his job. I think the media at Real Madrid or Barcelona would have just thought, this is ridiculous, this has gone beyond a joke now. I thought he was very interesting talking about going to Old Trafford and almost knowing that you're going to lose. Also financially, he's financially stable now, but that wasn't always the case when he stopped playing. Him and his wife had, I think he said, an Excel sheet. I thought that was really, really interesting.
Although surely, like, as a player, you'd be okay, wouldn't you?
No, I don't think you would. Okay. I think if you've played in the Portuguese league, and I think he had one year in Saudi, you'd be okay, but I don't think you're having life-changing amounts of money. And if you've not been wise with your money, you definitely wouldn't be okay. And I think that's why him and his wife have sort of planned their incomings and outgoings. But just to get that insight was really good.
Yeah.
Just
again, and something that he offered up without us having to really probe too much.
Yeah, and I think this all plays into the new decision makers led by Ineos changing everything. So on one hand, you can't change all the staff at the club and then say the rules are different for the manager. They really are sweeping changes, and this isn't for everybody. And players have made reference to that, and a lot of good people have lost their jobs. But this is, look, we're going to do it our way because we think we can get it right our way. And that includes the manager who we are going to back. And again, back to the circumstances why he came, I'm still convinced he was going to go to Manchester City. So Manchester United had to swoop to get him at the time. He didn't want it, but the train came along, he had to jump on it, and it was a hell of a bumpy ride up until now. Hopefully it will get a little bit smoother.
Yeah, let's hope so. It also speaks to his relationship with Sir Jim Ratcliffe as well. We've had a bit of insight as we've gone along about exactly how these two converse, telling each other to F off and other things. But it turns out that they actually have another way of expressing themselves to one another.
We speak on the phone, you send me message, you send me gifts, you call it gifts? Jokings. So we have this kind of relationship. I think it's really easy to deal with Jim. Easy in the sense that everything, if you know your stuff, and if you know how to explain any decision, you'll be fine with him. If you try to use some bullshit in big words with him, he's going to knock you. So for me, it's really easy. I will say whatever I need to say with, of course, with a lot of respect, like with everybody. I know that he is the owner of the club. I know my place. But when I need to say something, I will say it naturally, with no bullshit, if I can say it. With no bullshit. I'm not around the subject. I'm really direct. I think it's something that he likes a lot.
Yeah, Laurie, gifts. I didn't expect that.
No, nor did we, and we had to sort of check that he had to check with us that he was saying the right thing, because we sort of thought he was saying gifts. You know, like Ed Woodward used to give Lou Van Gaal a bottle of red wine if you ever beat a top six team. We sort of wondered whether Jim had a little sort of understanding with Ruben, but no, it's gifts. So the thought of a 72-year-old petrochemicals billionaire, just like the rest of us, picking out his favourite little looping clip. I mean, I've got a few which I referenced in the written piece that I did. You know, the Great Gatsby, Leonardo DiCaprio raising the glass of champagne to the camera, or Roy Hodgson sort of, you know, with that look of expectation on his face as England manager, I think against Iceland as England mount an attack, and then ultimately, oh no, they've missed the chance, and you sort of feel like maybe that was one that you got
that was the Europa League
sent
run,
last season,
wasn't
it? Getting all excited. But there's other, you know, the Homer Simpson one, the Jack Nicholson one in The Shining. So yeah, I mean, you can obviously have quite a bit of fun with what he might be sending him, and that was tempting to ask Ruben Amorim after the game last night. What has Jim sent you a gift after that one, because it was such a chaotic game against Everton that you sort of wondered whether that was a particular moment for him to, you know, get the go into the vault of his favourite gifts. So yeah, I think, but it just sort of shows the human element, right? And you know, the question was, you know, with the expletive within it, you know, in terms of Amorim. Jim, in an interview, I think it was the Times and the Telegraph that they did at the time, saying that, you know, if he ever oversteps his expertise, when they have these cups of tea at Carrington, Amorim tells him to fuck off. And then Amorim, you know, took that on board and basically said, well, the thing is, you know, with Amorim, with Jim, you don't want to bullshit him. He doesn't like bullshitters, and I don't do that. I go direct. I don't talk around the subject, and I think that's what he likes about me. So I think that's a very revealing window into their relationship, and also the way that Sir Jim Ratcliffe manages the club entirely.
I also thought he said gifts, so I had images of him sending like a new pair of slippers to Ruben Amorim, and send again message, did you get your new slippers? But it was gifts. So I'd be intrigued to what they are. Is it people slipping over like I see on mine all the time? Is that like a snide warning to stop doing this or whatever? But I think they've got a very frank and honest relationship, and I think that is important. You know, Jim Ratcliffe is not qualified to tell Ruben Amorim detail about players. You know, I've worked with top coaches and stuff, and their level of seeing a game is completely different to my level, and I find that you learn from them. So I think if he asserts his authority, that's it. Yeah, you've been very successful in business. You are ultimately my boss, but I know what I'm doing. Listen to me. Because there's so many interfering club presidents, not that Sir Jim Ratcliffe's a president, and I've spoken to Real Madrid managers and they're like, I didn't really pick the team because I was under so much pressure from the president. I don't think there's any evidence of that at Manchester United. But I think they've got a good relationship and they both need each other. They both need each other for it to be successful. So much rather that than silence and no communication. Because I've also heard that with managers. I've not heard from the club president since last September, and that's not good. That's ominous.
No, absolutely. It does beg the question, what is Sir Jim Ratcliffe's favourite gift, though, doesn't it? So by all means, if you want to get involved in that, let us know in the YouTube comments. Send us an email, devilspod@theathletic.com. It would be fascinating to see what you come up with, given some of the recent comments on the YouTube channel especially. We won't go back into that, though. I think, actually, of everything that Ruben Amorim said, the one thing that I found really interesting, and to be honest, it's not the first time I've heard the boss of United talk about this, but the idea of this cultural reset, of setting new rules, setting new standards. This is what Ruben Amorim had to say on this very topic.
Sometimes you have that feeling that we are losing. Let's change a little bit the standards just for them to be with me. I didn't felt that last season, and they also saw that. So they understand that when I say one thing, I will do it. That is really important. And I think the change of culture is more a club thing than a manager thing. I cannot do everything by myself. But I think we improve in every department, medical department, nutrition. We have a new chef. We have new rules. The rules is not to treat the players as a babies. I treat them as a man, but they have rules now. And that can change the way you train. If you don't train in the right way, I have footage to show you, and I show you in front of everybody. So I'm always on top. I will expect to be in one phase that I don't need to do anything because they will push each other. What I feel in this year is that I have more people to do that. And we have a leadership group now. It's not just Bruno. It's not just Harris. It's 6 guys now. They are responsible for the group. There are some things that in last year I have to deal with that. I said in this year, you deal with that. Small issues is with you guys. You are responsible. All these small changes, I think is helping the group.
Who's in that?
Yeah. So we have. I was saying it. I was like, oh no. Yeah, we have Bruno, we have Licha, we have Ari, we have Diogo, we have Tom, and we have Nus. So it's not just the oldest one. Nus is in the group because he's a character that I like, and I try to understand the dynamic of the group. Try to reach every space. And they are the guys that are responsible to keep everyone in line.
Yeah, Andy, this idea of a leadership group, it's not new to United necessarily. Obviously, it's new to this group with this head coach in charge. But the whole sort of package of the dressing room running itself and the expectation that if you train badly even once, it will be shown in front of everyone. I find that absolutely fascinating. This is either going to go really well or spectacularly badly, isn't it?
Yeah, and being shown without words, just like to complete the humiliation for everybody else to see it. As you say, there's always been leadership groups, there's always been key people. But if you wind back 5 years, the main figure in Manchester United's dressing room by distance was Paul Pogba, for example. And people really looked up to him. That was after Zlatan Ibrahimovic had left the club because he was a major figure, and you get these new signing, sometimes with huge egos, sort of asserting themselves at the top of the tree in the dressing room. I think the people who are in this group, because he didn't name them, I think there's a nice balance there. You know, Tom Heaton doesn't play, but we all know Tom a bit, don't we? And I think if we had to give him a character reference, it'd be an exceptionally good one. So I'm glad that he's in there. He knows England. He knows what a good dressing room looks like and a bad dressing room. And Manchester United's dressing room has been bad in very recent times. I said it in November when Ruben took in. I kept using the word complicated, and I absolutely stand by that. And then look at Diogo Dalot. He's in there.
Do you think
he
it's
sort of
changed?
plays all the time. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I'm not saying it's perfect, but I think it's changed. Do you?
Yeah, I'd go along with that. I mean, again, it's an easy sort of thing to say in a pre-season where, you know, generally the kind of mood has been good, but it has been, I think, quite remarked upon how positive the vibe has been around the place. There's not been any kind of sense of tension or sort of little cliques going on, and I think that's why, I mean, Amorim sort of didn't immediately offer up the names on this leadership group, but so obviously the question from about 5 different
at the same time
was, God, who's in this group then? And he started laughing.
He knew it was coming, didn't he?
I knew you were going to ask me that, and then he had to sort of think to himself. But it's a kind of eclectic mix, really, isn't it, in terms of particularly sort of Nus Mazraoui. You might be surprised at him being in there.
Very popular.
Delgado. No Luke Shaw, who's actually the longest serving player. No Casemiro, who's obviously won 5 Champions League. I wonder if that's to do a little bit with his English skills.
Yeah.
So he said that it's the group.
Even Matthias de Ligt, actually. I kind of thought he might be in the reckoning, considering he's been a captain so much in his career already as well.
Well, I suppose he has. I suppose that equivalent maybe is Mazraoui. So you've got that guy. I mean, he signed at the same time, didn't he? But maybe because he said it's a group that gets into all the corners of the dressing room that I like. So he knows better than us, the different relationships that people have got and whether they're able to exert, cajole, persuade, admonish, their teammates in different ways. And that was something we spoke to Lenny Yoro after the game actually in Atlanta about, and he sort of said, this. Well, he said he's trying to think of the right word. Obviously, bless him, he's doing it in his second language at least. He's sort of saying, well, there's older players, and I don't mean older. I mean, more experienced players. I mean, obviously, everyone's kind of older to him, isn't they? He's sort of 19 or whatever he is.
But they are, aren't they?
Yeah. And he sort of said that they've got the experience, the know-how to kind of handle these different relationships, and so he felt it was a good thing. And as we say, it's an early point of the season. This kind of thing has existed before, but it feels like they've been given a lot of license, I think, particularly with the new sort of standards, the code of conduct that Amorim touched on in our interview, and we've kind of been able to establish a little bit more details on in terms of it being written down and made reference to in conversations about being on time for training, about the kind of clothes that you wear, about engaging with fans, because obviously we saw perhaps some issues, shall we say, with the post-season tour. I know it was a positive tour, really, from United's point of view, even though a lot of the players didn't want to go in initially. But that kind of thing of not ignoring fans when you're walking past them it sounds quite basic, really, but I think to have a group there that will enforce that and to have it written down should then, over time, create this kind of culture of high performance, of making sure that you're on it whenever you're representing the badge. And so that can only be a good thing when you're asking them to then perform on the pitch.
How do you reckon it works in reality? If you're a mad, do you go up to your main man like Nus and say, the fish was a bit undercooked in the canteen today? I think one point that Ruben referred to was, let them deal with the small issues. Let me deal with the big stuff. If you're squabbling, sort it out among yourselves. And I know at times Bruno Fernandes has felt like he's had a really tough job trying to knit the different parts of the dressing room together. And I think he's really tried to do that. And it's been very, very difficult, very complicated for him. I do think it is a little bit easier now. And I've spoken to a couple of the players off the record, just chatting after games, and I absolutely get a sense that the dressing room is a happier place. And they would definitely say to me if that wasn't the case.
Yeah, it's good to hear, isn't it? Just to reflect some of the messages that we had as well. Stephen, having watched Amorim's post-match press conferences over in the States, I wonder why Laurie was always the last one selected to ask a question. Is that a thing, Laurie?
I didn't realise that was a thing. I think I was the last one after the game in Chicago, wasn't I? Because sometimes there's a kind of, a strategy or a process to the post-match press conferences where the first question traditionally would be a fairly straightforward one. How was the game?
I sat in Chicago. What were your thoughts on the game? Something like that. That's your opener.
Yeah. And then I knew in Chicago I wanted to ask about Sesko. And listen, he kind of repeated his answer from the Hoyland one, didn't he, in terms of the transfer window still open. But I think it was kind of telling in the sense that he did touch on that. So anyway, when you've got a question like that in mind, you don't put your hand up, you don't kind of make a nod. I actually asked the first question in Atlanta last night.
And I asked the last one.
There we go.
Yeah.
Reversal.
So first, last.
The pincer movement.
Dovetailing.
Yeah. And I knew I wanted to ask
the way all
about
good couples work.
About Big Brian. For a blag, I was going to say,
question as well.
What did you make of Big Brian's debut? I thought, no, that's a little bit over familiar. Ruben, what did you make of Brian's debut? Was actually what I asked. He gave a pretty decent answer.
It was good.
Yeah. Okay. There's a little bit of a reveal into the fourth estate and how they operate on that one. So I hope that satisfied you, Stephen. Steve, not Stephen. just reflecting really on Ruben Amorim, and it feeds into your message that you put out on X as well, Andy. So, or your post, I should say. He says, I absolutely love Ruben Amorim. I've completely fallen for his sweet, honest charm. The interview with The Athletic was so good to hear, paired with a good pre-season and visible culture reset. I'm feeling really positive. It's the best I've felt in a long time about the future. And obviously you referenced it before, but basically you said that Amorim came across superbly. He's so engaging. It's all about results now. But I can't help but feel he's the right man for a complicated and tough job. What gives you the confidence that he is that, Andy?
Well, the way he talks to you, for example. So if I could take us back to 2018, Jose Mourinho on a pre-season tour, I had the impression he didn't want to be Manchester United manager, and that is not good. So the opposite of that is Ruben Amorim the other day, infused, looking really healthy. He looks fit, productive. He looks like he's totally on it, focused. He's not going off the record and going, "Oof, I've got to get rid of him or him." It was just a force
on the record
of energy. Yeah, that's on the record. Yeah. But he just needs to have a winning football team. Words will only count for so much. And if Manchester United are 15th in November, the tide will completely flip against that. And I think you've also... There's an element of it cursing with the pre-season optimism that every football fan has. Because you have this idealised version of what's to come. We all think that Cunha and Mbeumo are going to be successful. But if we're being a bit more sceptical, we'd say the success rate on Manchester United signings is less than 50%. But at the moment, they're going to be great and they're just what we need. And if we can get a number 9 and maybe this position and that position, top 4, maybe even third, second or first, that's what football fans are like. So I am feeling it. I know that this pre-season has been better than others, but there's still a but there, because you don't just jump from 15th straight up. There's a long way to go.
Yeah, there's still a lot of work to be done. The Everton draw showed that. We'll talk about that next. But just before we move it on, one aspect that we didn't talk about with Ruben Amorim and the conversation that Andy and Laurie had with him was transfers. He said in that he was happy with the business that had been done so far, but it sounded like United was still trying to work on things. That, of course, includes Benjamin Sesko, and we'll bring you the latest on that a little bit later on the show. Just while I've got you, at TOT Devils on Instagram, TikTok and X, they are our social media accounts. If you're not following, go and have a look at those and drop us a follow. And remember to subscribe to the show on YouTube if you've not done so already. Leave us a comment, leave us a like as well if you can, and click the bell, as Carl Anka would say, to make sure that you never miss an episode. Okay, Manchester United 2, Everton 2 was how the summer series was signed off by the Reds. It did mean that it was enough to crown them as champions of the Premier League summer series. Not that you'd know that they'd won anything from the pictures that were taken after the game. Bruno Fernandes, I think I've never seen anyone more upset to be holding a trophy in their lives. Perhaps it's the message of trying to keep the feet on the ground and not get too carried away that came through on that. But generally speaking, I think it maybe wasn't as positive, Laurie, as the previous 2 games over there.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, because Everton got at United, didn't they? I sort of asked Amorim afterwards about that, and was there any concern, in midfield about a team being able to create chances like that against United? And he sort of said, I think you could change the personnel and they'd still be able to do that kind of damage, long balls, second balls, that kind of thing. So, it's something to consider. It's a different way of playing, I suppose, than they'd faced against Bournemouth, for example, certainly, maybe even West Ham. So, that's going to be something for Amorim to consider and try and contend with, because it's all very well and good having this fluid, vibrant attacking unit that creates chances. But if you're not able to be resistant to a more direct team, then that is going to cause you issues in the Premier League. But I think it was a fair assessment from him in that actually there was optimism, there was positivity around that front sort of 4 even. It was kind of strange because obviously we're trying to figure out who was going to start up top, and you've got Mbeumo and Cunha both in the team. And then I think it was probably Cunha that was the main focal point, although he was dropping deeper, and Mbeumo and Fernandes were kind of pushing on into the final third. And then even Ahmad you had getting really advanced, certainly in the first half. half where he was linking really nicely with Mbeumo, with Cunha, with Fernandes, who kind of came across from the left to the right. So lots of movement, lots of vibrancy. That is an option that I think they've spoken about previously privately, that they could have this carousel of attacking options, but clearly you feel like if you had a consistent number 9 there at a focal point, then that's something to get really excited about. And I think then that, the fact that Rasmus Højlund stayed on the bench for the most part of the game, is a kind of telling, I guess, example of where he's at and where his future what his future might look like. So, I think there were certainly reasons to be concerned, but at the same time, I think it was kind of positive. I mean, Mbeumo sort of showed that ability to come in on his left foot off the right flank, opens up quite a lot of the pitch, in like this quick passing inside that he does. Now, obviously, as Amorim touched on, his physical condition, clearly you can see it's not where it should be this stage in the pre-season, but he started later, so hopefully he'll be sort of fully fit for the time Arsenal comes around.
Yeah, he's got a couple of weeks to sharpen up, hasn't he?
I'm amazed at Two Phones Laurie didn't praise Mason Mount, because he turned beautifully and scored a very good goal. Laurie's quite positive there. I agree, but I'll give you some of the negatives the way I saw it. Giving the ball away too much. Ahmad, who had a decent game. Ugarte, who was disappointing. I thought he'd played well against West Ham in New Jersey. Bruno Fernandes losing the ball. One of those losses of possession led to Everton's pretty freakish second goal, so that was a bit of a blow. So elements of the midfield and the defenders standing off, it concerned me a little bit. Everton are a below mid-table team. That said, it was a much changed side. You've got to give minutes to most of the players. A lot fewer younger players getting minutes. I think Amorim knows he's in it for real now. You cannot be just giving minutes to players who are not going to feature in your plans. I think he's still trying to figure out what his best first 11 is going to be, and there's pretty compelling questions all over the place. Does Harry Maguire or De Ligt start? I think Lenny Yoro has done himself
he's
well.
great, isn't he?
Yeah, he is, and I think physically he looks much more impressive. I don't know whether he's been using Laurie's PT instructor. Well, probably not, because it made a difference. The goalkeeper, there's issues there. I think Tom Heaton's come out of this tour as the best goalkeeper. So I think that the draw against Everton, it just lowered the mood a little bit. It showed that there's still a real lot of work to do, but encouraging debut from Bryan.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit more in a sec, but I just want to go into some of the comments from Bruno Fernandes, Laurie, if we can, after the match. I mean, Amorim did say that in the halftime interview, which is a flavour of what we're going to be getting in the new Premier League season with these halftime manager interviews, but he said that he thought the defence should have pushed out a lot quicker on the first goal that was scored, the first equaliser for Everton. And it was a word lazy that stood out that Bruno Fernandes used after the game as well, to say that some of the players in that game in particular were being lazy, that the club actually needed maybe one or two more new signings to just bring up the level of competition even further. I mean, they're very pointed, and maybe that's why his face was so downbeat when he lifted the trophy or picked up the trophy after the game. But very, very pointed comments from the captain.
Well, especially, you sort of think pre-season tour is fairly... Okay, NBC, you got real sort of reporters there and pundits that are asking him good questions, but you sort of feel like you can get away with kind of just offering up, platitudes really, a pre-season friendly, finale. You don't have to go deep and serious like Bruno Fernandes did. He even obviously touched on the raised ticket prices for fans and the jobs that have been cut from the club entirely, and sort of saying that, well, we players need to acknowledge that and recognise that and know that that's the kind of thing we're having to perform for because of all these cuts that are going on. So yeah, I thought it was really interesting what he said, and he has to look at himself as well. He did give the ball away, in that second half particularly. So I think he should include himself in the analysis.
When the second goal went in, wasn't he?
That's what I was looking at, because you had obviously my boy Mason Mount getting in the mix as well. He said he was going to cut out the yellow cards this season, but as soon as it's kicking off between Bruno Fernandes and Dye, it was a silly kick as well, wasn't it, from Fernandes? Fernandes. He'd beaten him, and it was pretty petulant. Yeah. So, but Mount backs his guy up, and then you got O'Brien that coming in. So I was kind of watching them for having a scrap, and then all of a sudden Everton have scored. I'm thinking, how has that got in? And then you watch the replay, you're like, wow, that is comical. And I mean, maybe that's just bad luck, and on another day United win this. But then to that point, Amorim actually said he kind of felt it was a good reality check. The momentum that they'd gained from the first 2 wins was, can be a false position for them, and this gave them the perfect mentality to go back to Carrington, where they've had a good, positive pre-season, but also just that reminder that you've not made it here at all. This is going to be tough. You finished 15th in the Premier League last season. You're going to have these games where you are maybe bullied or you are finding things difficult. So yeah, he felt, I think it was a useful end to the pre-season. I mean, I am a little bit surprised that Andy had 5 minutes in his answer and he didn't mention once David Moyes. You talk about me and him having a bromance. What about that in the bowels of the Mercedes-Benz Stadium when Moyes is kind of walking back and forth, and I'm just like, oh, all right, David, yeah, have a great trip home.
Well, no.
Pre-season.
No. He came up to me, picked me out in the crowd, went, Andy, me old mucker.
He was literally running away from
back.
you. He was like, I'm not got to speak to this guy again ever.
Just pure respect. Laurie said you're going to ask Moyes a question in the post-match. I'd have asked him everything I want to ask him. The respect would just
nothing
burn
about the
through.
Stadium, because it was a fantastic stadium. Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't even mention that in your answer.
I was about to.
Okay, sorry, right.
So them half-time interviews, were they on the screens at half-time? So, I mean, you couldn't do that at Old Trafford, could you? Because there's no scoreboards like that. It is a stunning stadium. It seats 75,000. It's one of the best in the world. It'll stage a semi-final in the World Cup next year. The prices weren't as bad as I thought. I went round thinking, right, where's my $18 beers? And I'm like, oh, a soda's only $3. And the views, it was just pretty faultless as a stadium. I mean, the opposite of the stadiums I grew up standing in. So I've got reservations about all the modernness of it all, but everyone had a top view. And the facilities were just spectacular. It wasn't a sellout. Manchester United are not where they were 10, 15 years ago, where these games would sell out. That's partly because they're using dynamic pricing just to set the market. But United fans probably made up 70, 80% of the crowd. And there were 4 teams there. There's a big pocket of Everton fans. But the screen at the top of the stadium, it's one of the biggest in the world. And when there are breaks in play, it just focuses in on different people in the crowd. And you just find yourself being drawn to it. Even when the game's playing, the screen is that good. You sometimes watch the screen rather than the game in front of you, because it's absolutely massive and it's really clear. So I was hating myself for that. No, you're in the stadium. Why are you watching it on a screen? You got 3D down there. Why are you watching it 2D up there? But ugly stadium from the outside, but pretty spectacular. Do you agree? Stadium.
I quite liked them on the outside as well, to be
fair.
These
newfangled things, like big screens. Unbelievable.
I know.
They'll never catch on at Old Trafford.
Alan was wondering what octave you'd reached, Laurie, when you were talking about Mason Mount's goal, but I think Andy actually reached a higher octave talking about the big screen. So, Alan, I hope you're not disappointed. Let's talk about our Bri then, Bryan Mbeumo. It was his debut, Laurie, wasn't it, for Manchester United last night? He got 45 minutes. Maybe not as sharp as we can expect him to be. He's got a couple of weeks to get up to speed. But I thought in particular, his interchange and his interplay with Cunha, with Ahmad, with Bruno Fernandes in that first half in particular, when they attacked, when they went forward, it felt like the angles made more sense. The positions made more sense. The moves actually looked like what Ruben Amorim's been trying to install at Manchester United. That to me felt very pointed and has felt quite pointed across these 3 matches, that actually some of the interplay and some of the attacking play in particular feels far more coordinated than last year.
Yeah, and this is something that I'm going to go into on my post-tour wrap-up, shall we say, in terms of the way that he coaches them and the details and the specifics that he gets into them with, and how he does that. And he's very precise on the positions. He even sort of touched on that with us in the interview in terms of, the midfield being athletic or not, and saying, well, actually, sometimes it's about trusting your teammate and knowing exactly when to move and how, and that makes you faster, even by 1 metre. So I think that's the kind of things that he's been drilling into his team during this pre-season tour. But Mbeumo's got that Premier League quality within him. You can see that, the way, for example, that he followed in, I think it was a Bruno Fernandes shot, that he was there determined to score. He's got that enthusiasm for goals that I think, is a very vital point of this, because, for all that you know that he's a quality player, it's that that mentality that's important as well, that belief that you're going to score, a tap in, a rebound, so many goals come in imperfect ways, and that approach that he has, I think, is important. But yeah, I certainly thought that the way that he was able to get that understanding with Ahmad, with Cunha, with Bruno, I think was really important and telling, and hopefully that can be built upon as the weeks go on.
He's really fast as well. There's a couple of times, bizarrely, bringing the ball out of defence or running for a ball coming as Manchester United cleared an attack, and I just thought, fast, eager. I don't have any doubts about his personality. I don't think Big Bry's going to be taking to Twitter writing absolute nonsense. When we sat with him last week, I just thought, this is someone who's really calm and measured and understated and analytical. And we talk about the chess playing and the piano playing. I think that all plays into a personality of sort of calmness and not getting too carried away or getting swayed either way with everything. And I think that will help when you become a Manchester United player, because it'd be very, very easy when you're looking at your social media numbers going, whoa, to be swayed by that. And I don't really have any worries about him. I thought it was an encouraging enough debut from Bryan Mbeumo.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll see more of him against Fiorentina at Old Trafford at the weekend. Another aspect that we need to talk about was Manuel Ugarte's performance, because obviously we saw at the end of last season, Andy, he was left out of the Europa League final. Maybe, as we've sort of speculated about on the podcast before, maybe because of the way that he played in the previous rounds where his ball retention wasn't as good as it needed to be. And again, last night he was caught for Everton's first goal in possession. He gave the ball away a number of times, and that feels like the one area still that is to be confirmed a little bit. I don't know whether that means that it's a different player who plays in that particular role, or whether United are able to do something in the remainder of this transfer window to solve the problem that they've got there, or they just get Ugarte to improve. But there still needs to be a solution found in that role, it feels like. And last night reminded everyone of that, I think.
Yeah, he faded towards the end of last season, and I think he knew it. That first half in Bilbao in the semi-final, even though United led 3-0 at half-time, he had a horrendous first half, in my opinion. He kept giving the ball away, especially early on during the game. And he lost his place in the team. When we spoke to him last week, he was much more infused, sort of fitter mentally, ready to go second time. I think he's a top lad. He's... Again, from a professional perspective, I have no issues with him whatsoever. But how is he going to compete against Declan Rice, Zubimendi and Odegaard in a couple of weeks when Manchester United play Arsenal? No, they are all top players. And if you're not on your game against them, you are going to be punished. You cannot be giving the ball away like he gave the ball away. You give the ball away once, yeah, okay. But if it's happening 2, 3, 4 times, then it's much more of a worry. I think there's a lot of willing for Ugarte to succeed. I think there's people like his profile, his youngness, his toughness, his eagerness. He's started doing... his English is really coming on. He loves being in Manchester. He says all of the right things, but he's got to play better.
Mm. Do you think there could be something done in that position, Laurie, in the remainder of this window? Is that an area that you feel like United could still be active in?
I think it's certainly been a position that they have identified at the start of this window as one that they wanted to address and supplement. Now, obviously, that brings into the equation who would potentially go out, because, okay, Christian Eriksen has left the club, but I think that was, particularly with United not being in Europe this season, you don't have to have that big a squad, and Aaron touched upon that. He wanted to have a small squad so that everybody feels they've got a chance, they've got that competition in the training each day, where at the end of the week they've got an opportunity to then actually perform on the pitch. So I don't know if it's necessarily they need to replace Eriksen, but I think that if they do bring somebody in, that does raise the question on, for example, Manuel Ugarte, Kobbie Mainoo, how much minutes they're going to get. But yeah, I think I've said before on the podcast, I think an athletic kind of midfielder is somebody that Amorim would like, a sort of number 6. I think he has a number 6 and number 8. There is 2 deeper midfield positions, and so you do think that if they do get a striker, we're obviously going to talk about Benjamin Sesko in a little bit, that naturally means that Bruno Fernandes comes deeper, and therefore you've kind of got one position alongside him, that number 6. So Manuel Ugarte, ideally would do that, right? That's role, kind of breaking up play, giving it to the perhaps more creative players. But as you've said there, Ian, the giving the ball away is an issue, because if you're doing that in Premier League games, you're going to get pounced on, you're going to be conceding chances, and then United are going to be a weaker team for it. So either he needs to improve, or United might end up looking at that position when the transfer market develops.
Okay, well, you've teased it. Let's talk about Benjamin. So, Andanami got in touch on YouTube. I hope I've done this throughout the course of the show already, but we're supposed to call him Šeško, which is not the easiest thing to say. It sounds like there's a little bit of Sean Connery coming on and a couple of drams that have been drank. But Benjamin Sesko is the player that Manchester United want for this striker position. Newcastle have complicated things. A Slovenian journalist, certainly on X, Laurie, has complicated things by putting out a story that he'd wanted to join Newcastle, or he'd chosen to join Newcastle. What's the truth as you understand it about where we're at with this transfer?
Yeah, and I think reports can come from all kinds of places. Obviously, Slovenia is Šeško's homeland, so you still wonder the connections there.
Nice pronunciation.
There we go. I've sort of slipped in there. I didn't make a big deal out of it, but I appreciate you noticing
Slipped
that.
It in.
I went for
Nice.
Šeško.
Yeah.
And so, that could well be the case. My information is that the situation is very open still. He hasn't yet made a decision, although I'm aware of the fact that, his agent is talking to United about, kind of wages and associated fees with a move. So I don't see how he would be having those kind of talks if, Sesko had already said, I'm going to join Newcastle. So from my impression, it was probably more Manchester United that he favoured, just because of the stature of the club and the fact that, if it was a long-term decision, I know that Newcastle are in the Champions League right now, but the idea is that United will be in the Champions League consistently. So you don't really want to make a decision perhaps based on just one summer, but it does feel, Newcastle have made a bid. They are applying pressure there to the player if they can get something agreed with Red Bull Leipzig, whether they then, sort of suggest to him, well, Newcastle is the one that we've got the offer accepted on, you kind of have them or you stay. I feel like United want to get to a position where they have Sesko on board and then they try and do a deal with Leipzig, because, that's what they did with Brentford and Bryan Mbeumo. So, yeah, it's a delicate one, I think. Certainly conversations are ongoing, but I think the situation is still open.
Bit tricky, United.
Can they afford it, Andy?
Yeah. So, and if you want to ask me why, there's a bit more wiggle room now.
How?
Well, United have had some money come in from sell-ons from 3 or 4 players, such as Anthony Elanga and Alvaro this summer. One of the PSR deadlines is at the end of...
Well, June 30th, isn't it, next year?
June,
So as long as they make
next
sales by that point, they can balance everything out. But also the big year that they made, kind of, I suppose, big losses, or they spent big, certainly in the transfer market. Anthony and Casemiro is dropping off the 3-year cycle, so there's a bit more flexibility than they had done previously.
Do United feel that they can do it, which I wouldn't have said 3 weeks ago? And I think there may be some optimism that there would be sales as well to bring money in. So I'm going to call him Big Ben. But if he doesn't come, Big Bell. United have been there before in negotiations. Pretty tricky, with his agent. But if you understand that the player absolutely wants to join your club, that puts you in a really strong position. And as Laurie said, United did have that with Big Bry. And it just gives you the security, which they didn't have. It was the opposite of Frenkie de Jong, agreement between the clubs or close to it, but a player who never, ever wanted to leave Barcelona. So this is quite a smart way of doing it. Now, if he's got a burning desire to join Newcastle United, then fine. But I've never been led that is the case. And even when I saw those reports on Friday, I never felt this is a done deal at all. I looked at the comments under our last podcast. It was all like, here's our new Talk of the Devil show. Šeško. What about Šeško? I'm like, just listen and watch what we've done. There's more to to Manchester United than this, but I accept there is a big demand for that. Reminded me when there was a Liverpool journalist about 10, 11 years ago, and he put a genuine tweet out saying, I've just had a house fire, I feel relieved, we've all survived. But it was a serious tweet, and all the comments underneath, Otto Suarez quote's true, mate. I'm like, I've just literally walked out of a burning home, but this is what transfer does. It attracts this. I cannot wait until the transfer window is over. Laurie probably has a very different opinion to me, and I respect that.
Yeah, you've not got long to wait now. It's less than 4 weeks, to be fair. So we are on countdown. And Omar Berrada says that Manchester United are literally...
What about Šeško? Sorry to interrupt, but what about Šeško?
I'm still talking about transfers.
Just give me a yes or a no.
Worry.
Yes or no. What do you think then, mate? I know you're not giving me a yes or a no, but what do you think? If you had to say, what would you say? Because these are the type of things I've had all weekend.
And in person as well.
In person. Yeah.
Which is nice. It's great that people have come up to us and said hello. But yeah, there has been a theme running through the questions.
Yeah, and the theme's been Benjamin Sesko. Omar Berrada says that the club are still working around the clock, Laurie, as well on transfers, which is interesting. It's not often that we hear from the CEO of the club at this sort of stage of a transfer window. He spoke to the club's in-house TV station, MUTV, before the game against Everton. So, that again adds a little bit of pressure, doesn't it? The fact that he is being open about the fact that United is still working on transfers and brings a little bit more expectation that there's more to be done.
Yeah, I thought that was a hint, actually, that they want to do another signing. And we've reported it, but it's another thing when the chief executive actually says on the record what his mindset is. So it wasn't strong, but it was certainly that way. Inclined, that was the movement of his conversation. And yeah, I think the fact that he's sort of saying we're working around the clock, we're having early meetings and late night phone calls because you've got, a team back in England, so I think Christopher Vell, the director of recruitment, who's obviously important in the Sesko pursuit, he's had him a couple of times at Salzburg and Leipzig when he worked there. He's back there over there, because I think he was over here for the first part of the tour. Also, Matt Hargreaves, the director of negotiations, he's over there. So you've got this, split between the guys that are over here, director of football Jason Wilcox, although having said that, they travelled through the night, didn't they? So they're probably just about to land back in Manchester, actually.
Yeah, probably home now.
Yeah. So
lucky them.
So it does mean that all the time differences, they're going to have to just, normal working hours don't apply, really. You have to take a call, you have to make a call at whatever moment is opportune, and that's what he's referring to there. But I agree with you, Ian. I thought that him actually even going there showed that they still want to do some more business as the weeks progress.
I like the fact that the chief executive goes on the record, because at times Manchester United have been too focused on only one voice coming out of the club, Erik ten Hag, for example. And now you've got Jim Ratcliffe doing stuff, but I think Omar should have done more stuff, and I'm not uncomfortable about it. He's not a showman. He's not got the ego where he wants to be centre stage. But if he's going to speak at opportune moments, I think that is a good thing for clarity, just to show that he is actually the most senior executive at Manchester United. And he comes across pretty well, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think so too. We'll leave it there then on Talk the Devils. We'll see what comes up by the time that you two are back home and we're doing our next episode as we build up to the new season beginning for Manchester United, of course, after the final pre-season friendly against Fiorentina at Old Trafford at the weekend. Remember those social media accounts. So the handle is at TOT Devils on Instagram, X and TikTok. If you've not subscribed on YouTube, please click subscribe. Thank you for your support for those who've done it already. And you can always get in touch with us, devilspod@theathletic.com on email. That's what Killian did. And this is one of the more remarkable ones that we've had just lately. So he said he woke up in Hawaii in paradise, starting to listen to the last episode. Fast forward 14 hours later, I did not expect we'd have to escape a tsunami. Sheltered in the University of Hawaii, then in a supermarket until almost midnight, trying to stay safe. Thankfully he did. And the pod, he says, put a smile back on his face. It was a calming end to what sounds like a pretty crazy day. So I'm glad you're safe, Killian. Thank you for letting us know that we helped you through that process. I'm hoping that there's not more things that we need to help each other through like last season. Not natural disasters, just disasters on the football pitch, to be honest. But let's see what this new campaign brings for Manchester United. But thank you for getting in touch. Thank you, everyone, for your support, as always. Andy and Laurie, thanks for being with us. Take care, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching the show. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, most importantly, and click that bell so you never miss an episode.
of Talk of the Devils.